Today we have a very special guest, heavy metal guitarist JD McGibney from Angels in the Battlefield. How are you today, man?
I'm doing good, Brody. How are you?
I'm not bad, just enjoying this SoCal weather.
Yeah, it's definitely a beautiful day today. It's like summer is here, but it's like a slow introduction. It's not that 1 week a year where we get 90-degree weather and you feel like you're in a frying pan.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's also one of those days where if you are having a shitty day, you can just literally just step outside for 5 minutes and if or instantly feeling much better.
Get that mental reset. Or if you're close enough, go to the beach.
Apologize for all our Midwest listeners right now. Before we get started into, you've got a pretty extensive career. You've done some really cool things, but give us the 30-second pitch on who is JD?
Oh man, who am I? It's always like a weird question for me, despite being like a performer, being like a guitar player and always being on stage. Like when the spotlight's put on me like that, I always feel like shy is like the best way for me to describe it, because it's I'm just me, but like I'm just a regular guy from Long Island, New York. Picked up guitar when he was a teenager and used that to help kind of deal with what I later came to identify as anxiety, and turn music into a career by playing on stage, doing session work, touring, enjoying myself. And I also really like pizza.
Well, it's hard to find a decent pizza out here in California.
Yeah, it is. When I moved out here originally, within a month, I was like, oh man, I might have made a terrible mistake because I just couldn't find any good pizza.
There's a place in West Hollywood called Vito's Pizza. I think it's on, I can't remember the name of the street, but it's towards like the really west side of West Hollywood. And it's the closest I've ever found to New York style pizza.
I'm wondering if it's the same, if it's like a chain, because there's a Vito's in Santa Monica,
Huh.
that is like this close to being like New York pizza. You walk in, even like the place has like the aesthetic of, oh, I just walked into a pizzeria in Brooklyn.
I have to go check that one out, I think. But yeah, now I'm getting hungry. So it was probably,
Man,
probably change the
it
topic.
is lunchtime.
Yeah, let's talk about your history with anxiety. When was probably your earliest memory of when you started to realize there is something different about the way that I feel?
I think that is a difficult question to answer, because I didn't realize that anxiety was a thing that I dealt with until I was like 29 or 30. And so a really good friend of mine was just like, everything that you're saying and you're doing, because I just went off on an anxiety loop, and it was like a tangent. He's, that's all anxiety talking, buddy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he just educated me a little bit, because he is a little bit more versed in mental health and psychology. And I ended up realizing, oh, this is something that I literally have just been dealing with like my entire life. Because I can just recall as far back as being like just a little kid, like 3, 4, 5 years old, like my earliest memories, and just always having this sense of worry that was just always there. And by the time I got into like adolescence, I was a teenager, starting to like figure out who I was. You have like your normal confrontations with your parents, because you're like, oh, I don't agree with this. I believe this way. And you have that butting of heads. At the same time, that little voice of worry just built up into this impending sense of doom that was just always there in the back of my head. And like basically since I was like a teenager until like even now, like sometimes it just turns into a really loud voice that like makes me question my abilities, or question my motivations, or question everything. And I always just have this fear of something's always about to go wrong for some reason or another.
It's kind of, you're always in this mentality of worst case scenario, basically.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah, and I could just be sitting down and not have any real like triggers, but like, there's always like stuff in the back of my mind where I'm like, I have to think about this. I have to worry about this.
Did you think about, were there any particular things that triggered these types of thoughts, or these types of mood spirals that you went in?
There are definitely things that are like consistent triggers for me. Growing up, I wasn't exactly the healthiest environment to be growing up in. Something that has continued is, even to like now, is like any kind of like yelling or any kind of potential confrontation, whether it's verbal or like physical, I automatically have this reaction to tense up and just fear. Even if someone seems like they're disappointed, I automatically have that sense of, oh, there's going to be yelling, or oh, what's going to be happening. And like it could just be like somebody dropped a plate. Like my instinct is to just have that sense of fear, like something's going to go wrong. And it took me a really long time, and like not until I was an adult, to realize, oh, this is not a normal reaction. Yeah, you're going to get startled if something happens out of nowhere. Anybody is. But to have that like severe fight or flight reaction, recognized was not healthy.
Was it just, did it just affect you mentally, or was it like, did it have effect on your body as well, physically? How'd that work for you?
I actually, when I realized that anxiety was like just generalized anxiety was something that I was struggling with and dealing with on a daily basis, I went and started doing research, and I actually went and started seeing a therapist for the first time in my life about a year and a half ago. But I ended up coming across a book called Unwinding Anxiety, which helped me a lot. And anyone that is listening that is dealing with anxiety themselves, I highly recommend the book. But one of the things that the author points out is that one of the big things that he teaches his clients, or the people who he's helping, is that they should practice mindfulness. And one of the things that he points out is to focus on their physical feelings in the moment when they noticed, oh, this is an anxiety loop. And for me, I noticed that a lot of times when I was getting anxious, or I let, that little anxiety voice take control, I always felt warm. Like I was comfortable. Like it wasn't like it's really hot, I got to turn down the thermostat. The best way I've been able to describe it, it felt like I was being microwaved, where like I was fine, but at the same time I was really like warm and like uncomfortable. And I always felt tense, like my muscles would ache, like I would have a neck issue like a lot. Like something I noticed is that like my eye will twitch if I'm just really stressed. Like my eye will twitch and I can't control it. So those are the physical symptoms. My foot will twitch a lot. I bite my nails. Those are the kind of physical representations of how my anxiety comes out.
It's not the first time I've heard symptoms like that. I've heard everything from biting your nails, the foot twitch, the eye twitch, to people that just could physically just lock up. They can't move. They just basically just become like a lack of a better term, a brick. You can't move them. It's scary.
Yeah, it's crazy what the human mind can do and have such strong effects on like the body. One of the biggest things that convinced me to go and seek professional help from a therapist was the fact that like I just always was tired. I wasn't sleeping well. And if I'm being completely honest, from the time I was maybe like 14, 15 years old, I was like beginning of high school, middle of high school, till a year or 2 years ago, when I started going to see like an actual therapist, I just hadn't slept properly. Like if I dreamed and remembered a dream, like it threw me off because I just never slept properly. Like I just always have this I just always would wake up regularly, and I would be aware that I was waking up most of the time, because I would wake up till I'd have to pee, or I would just wake up and have this sense of worry over something that was just like bothering me, or like this sense of dread over this task that I had to do that was coming up the next day, or something that had some sort of time sensitivity to it. And I wasn't sleeping for 2 decades basically.
So you're talking about these thoughts of dread, like you have a task you have to do, you have an upcoming show, like what specifically were those thoughts in your head? Is it that thought of I'm going to fail at this task, or this show is going to completely suck? What were you thinking in those?
Most of them had a similar thought process, or like a pattern. And for me, it was always just questioning my ability. I just never felt that I was able to do anything. I never felt like I was capable. So let's say I have to go on, everyone has to do their taxes every year. Like I was always afraid of filing my taxes, because I was like, oh man, I'm probably just going to like mess up something. I'm going to forget a piece of paper. I'm going to forget a document, or someone's going to look at my financial statement. And since they're an accountant, they probably have like really successful clientele, and they're going to see that I'm a musician, and they're going to be like, oh, this guy is like a loser, stuff like that. And like stuff that made no sense and had no grounding in reality. It was just my own anxiety taking control and leading me down a path without any data. One thing that I struggle with even to this day, being a musician, I'm an artist, and I honestly, I think I am terrible at my instrument. I love playing. I love writing music. I love playing music. I get paid to play music. But at the end of the day, because of the anxiety, I am extremely self-critical, and I just think that no matter what I do isn't good.
It's interesting because you've had a pretty successful career. You've done some awesome stuff. The fact that your mind can actually tell you, hey, what you're doing right now, you suck. You're not good. Like that, to me, it just blows my mind how the human mind can actually do that to people.
I know, and I honestly think me not being aware of what I was actually dealing with anxiety and letting that train of thought basically go off on its own without using logic, I think it's hindered my ability to go even further. One of the oldest sayings is you're always going to be your worst critic. And that's true. Like, I have experienced that ever since I picked up guitar. Like, I love it. It's great. Music has always been like a source of comfort for me. It's been a way for me to express myself. It's been a way for me to healthily vent and then come back and analyze my feelings. But I just think that I could always be better. Or I'll listen to someone that I look up to and be like, oh man, I really admire that guitar player. They're phenomenal. I am nowhere near as good as them. And there's that sense of comparing myself to other people, which is, again, something that is common with people who deal with anxiety. And if you go down that path, it can lead down to a path of, say, depression or like other things that are linked to anxiety.